So today I'm going to talk about becoming like children. And I'd like to start off with a verse from Matthew. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." So I honestly think about this verse often. Not really sure why. I think it's just a very powerful thing. And I'm sure that it must have been a very shocking statement for the people of the time, for Jesus' disciples to hear that kind of a statement. Because I think, so the funny thing about this verse is that this was in response to the disciples kind of arguing amongst themselves. Who do you think will be greater? Amongst themselves, right? Like, do you think you'll be greater? I'll be greater in the kingdom of heaven? You'll be greater because of such and such a reason? Yeah, I don't know how the conversation went, but they were debating and arguing amongst themselves who's going to be greater, which I think is kind of a silly argument to have. But you also have to keep in mind that this is after they already understood that Jesus was probably going to go, or Jesus was going to go the way of the cross, and maybe some of them also thought that that was their, they may not have much longer to live. So it was like a real question for them. But I wonder what they thought after Jesus said that, where he said, you have to be like this child. The person who's like this child will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus didn't say that, if you did more, if you did all the things that I told you to do, or if you went out and you evangelized the world, or if you prayed more, or if you impacted the world more, then you will be greater in the kingdom of heaven. That's not to say that those things don't matter, but I think that the point that Jesus was trying to make was that why you do what you do and the heart by which you do what you do is more important than the action itself. He's saying that having the heart of a child, and I'm going to talk about that more in a minute, by which you do the things that you do, makes a big difference. In the verse, it says a lowly position. In other translations, it says that whoever humbles themselves. So not a low position necessarily, but a position of humility. And today we recognize more and more that in order to be a great person, right, it's not enough just to have money or influence or a title, but a great leader or a great person is a person who's also willing to not use their title or their role as an excuse not to do the difficult work. Being willing to get your hands dirty, being willing to do things that maybe kind of seem like you shouldn't have to do them because you maybe reach a certain stage in your life or something like that, or have a certain title. But a willingness to serve without complaint. It's one of the reasons why we don't really use titles in our church. We don't have deacons, we don't have Elder John or Elder Bob. Deacon Ross or whatever, we don't have bishops. We just have us. And I like that because sometimes titles can become a hindrance. They can become like having the title means more than being a person that can just serve and help wherever that's possible. Here's a quote from our true mother. She said, "You need to be humble, humility. Those who are in positions of responsibility should first learn to be humble. They should not think that they have done well. On the contrary, they should feel that they need to learn from all those around them." And this is something I feel like children really excel in so many places where we as adults are lacking. And I think that that's kind of the heart behind the message today, is that oftentimes as adults, we feel like we have to impart onto the young people or teach the young people or guide the young people, and we do. That's fair, that's important. But whenever there's an opportunity for teaching, there's also an opportunity for learning. Children practice humility naturally in the sense that they aren't burdened by ego and pride and things like that we often struggle with in our own lives. And we can learn a lot by that. And I know, with having 4 children myself, that I learn a lot just by being around my kids or interacting with my kids. Things like maybe not necessarily like how to do a better job at renovating houses, but like things that are really, really important. The heart to try new things and to be excited about life. It's something that we lose sight of when we get older, which is kind of sad. The desire just to make another human being happy. You know how children, when they're young, or hopefully as they get older, they just want to make mom and dad proud, right? You probably remember that feeling at some point in your life, or you didn't really care, you just wanted to make mom or dad happy. And that's something that we lose to some degree as we get older. We don't intend for it to happen, but life goes by, time goes by, we get weighed down by life, we get stressed by thinking about the future, thinking regrets about the past, or worries about things that are happening in our life or in the world that we don't have control over. And then before we realize that, like, life is not exciting or interesting anymore. And it's kind of interesting. I've had a conversation with a couple people recently where we were talking about how there's a number of countries where the birth rate is so low that they're going to have like major problems with their population in just a couple decades because there's no children. There's no new people coming to like do the jobs and do the things that are being replaced, especially like places like Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and to a lesser degree, America also. People aren't having kids so much. And although I kind of understand the reasons for that, and I think I can't speak for other countries per se so much, but when we look at the world and we look at the state of so many families, we can understand why people grow up and they decide, I don't want to have a family, I don't want to have kids. And I think that's an inevitable byproduct of like so many broken families and so much pain and heartache in families. But I feel sad about that because I think that the world will be a much less interesting place. It'll be a very boring place without children. I think our church is really blessed because we have so many kids, even half the kids aren't here today, but our church has so many children compared to so many other churches. It's really a blessing. If you think that the church has life in it, it's because the children are in the church. It's because the kids are running around and they're screaming, and some are on roller skates, and they're chugging the cherry juice from the cafe, and it's like, okay, there's a balance, but it's these kind of things that maybe we wouldn't do as adults that really adds a flavor to life and to our church. That if it wasn't there, I just feel like, what's the point? Because also the children are the future. So like I said, hopefully, yes, we can have opportunities to teach and to guide and to make opportunities for learning, like I said before, hopefully from our mistakes or the things that we've done well in our life, our accomplishments. But there's a lot of things to learn. And so I was on ChatGPT again, and I asked ChatGPT, why does Jesus say that we should be more like children? I asked it a couple other questions too, and those were really thought-provoking, but I didn't want to have a sermon made up completely of ChatGPT stuff. But I thought that this answer was worth, was definitely worth repeating. So ChatGPT gave me 6 points, and the first point was humility. It said, Children are often seen as humble and not burdened by pride and arrogance. In Matthew, Jesus says, "Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven," like we read. By embodying humility, one can open their heart to God's teachings and receive spiritual growth. Faith. Children often trust and have faith in their parents without question. Similarly, the Bible emphasizes the importance of having a childlike faith in God. In Matthew 18:3, Jesus says, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Having faith like a child means trusting in God's plan and relying on his guidance. Dependence on God. Children are reliant on their parents for guidance, provision, and protection. In the same way, the Bible encourages believers to depend on God fully. Proverbs says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." Innocence and purity. Children are often associated with innocence and purity. The Bible urges believers to strive for moral purity and righteousness, as exemplified in passages like Philippians, which encourages believers to shine as lights in the world. Teachability. Children are generally eager to learn and are open to new ideas and concepts. In the same way, the Bible encourages believers to be teachable and receptive to God's word. Psalm 25:9 says, "He leads the humble in what is right and teaches the humble his way." And lastly, forgiveness and love. Children often have a forgiving and loving nature, and the Bible encourages believers to cultivate similar traits. Ephesians 4:32 says, "Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you." So that's what ChatGPT thinks. But it's kind of ironic that we spend our whole life growing up, right, and learning the skills to be an adult and kind of going through the process of what we feel like we should do to be successful as adults in this world. And then when we become adults, then the Bible tells us to turn around and become more like children. It's kind of ironic. But in a lot of ways, it makes a lot of sense. Because I think that a lot of things that we learn in the process of becoming adults actually don't really serve us that well in life. For example, we learn to not rely on others. Like one of the things that we learn often in the process of going through life and becoming adults is that I can't rely on others to take care of me. I can only depend on myself. This is something we often learn as adults, right? But that often really gets us in trouble because then we can't trust others and we can't share responsibility and we can't work together, even with our own like spouses and extended family members and things like that, because we become so kind of obsessed or focused on, I have to do things the way I have to do things because nobody cares about me. But to become more like a child, in a sense, calls us to remember that part of us that didn't mind relying on other people. You know, it's kind of interesting that with when the children are young, as parents, sometimes you can get a little bit frustrated. Oh my gosh, I wish they could just do some things for themselves. Wash the dishes, do the laundry, and things like that. But that's kind of a natural part of that stage of life, to be able to trust and rely on other people, your parents, right? And then we can kind of go to an extreme and just think, oh, I don't need anybody. I don't need anything. I can make my way in this world by myself. And I think that God wants us to not just be our own island, but God actually wants us to build meaningful relationships with the people in our lives and other people, and that means letting go. That means trust. That means dependence, some dependence. Like, I'm going to trust this area of my life with you. I'm going to trust this thing that's important to me to you. That's where real relationships come into play. And if we can't depend on other people for anything, it's very hard to actually apply putting our faith in God. It's actually really hard to depend on God for anything if we practice our whole life just not depending on anyone for anything. So even if life has turned out in such a way where we feel like we had to make our own way, we couldn't depend on others, we have to relearn that skill. We have to relearn that heart. And I think that's a big part of what Jesus was talking about, having the heart of a child, doing the things that we do, but with the heart of a child, the heart of offering, the heart to make another happy, the heart to depend on, and to put my faith in others, and to put my faith in God. These are things that we can practice a religious life, but not do those things. When we first moved here, there was a person that was coming to church, and our kids were very young at the time. I think, this was about 8 years ago, so the twins were 5. Mia was 3, and Annalise wasn't even born yet. And it was a hard transition moving here from the farm in Missouri. I call it a farm. I don't know what else to call it. Where else? What do you call a place that's like 5 miles down a dirt road where there's no cell phone reception, like 10 acres of land, no internet, or barely any? Yeah, it's kind of a farm, very farm-ish. And we used to just let the kids run around. They'd pick food from the garden. They half the time didn't have any clothes on, things like that. And then we moved to the complete opposite, which is urban brick and concrete city Denver, right? And it was a lot of adjusting. And mom and dad weren't around all the time. And it was a big change. And the kids it was hard for them too. And I remember oftentimes, some of you may remember from back then, but if Adonia would be giving a sermon, sometimes Mia would be like hanging onto her leg, or like she'd have to be holding Mia in her arms, because Mia was, when she was young, she wouldn't let anyone else hold her. She was very kind of high maintenance in that way. And same with the music or whatever. And I remember after one Sunday where it was kind of particularly challenging, we had this member emailed us and said, my idea of a church is that there's the stage, and that's like a holy space, and children shouldn't be on the stage. And we had to write him back and tell him that, there was a few things I mentioned, but basically that, I don't know where it's written that the stage is a holy place where children aren't allowed, but I told them that, we really want our church to be a place where children are welcomed and feel that this is their church. And also, like for us as parents, it sends a very strong message if we come here to pastor the church, but our kids can't be with us on stage or whatever, like they have to be, torn away crying or something like that, so that mom and dad can do their spiritual stuff. For us as parents, we really feel like that didn't send a message that we wanted to send to our family, to our kids. And this person stopped coming to church. Haven't seen him since, at church anyway. And I feel bad about that because, obviously as a pastor, I don't want to make a situation where someone doesn't feel welcome at the church. But also, we had to stick with what we felt we were trying to create as an environment for the church. And, this may sound a little bit blunt, but please consider, it's in some ways, it's a little bit more important that we create an environment that's welcoming for the children than for the old, narrow-minded, rigid people, okay? I hope that this person comes back someday because he's a really good person. If you ever watch this, yeah. But I really want to continue to create a church where families that really embraces families and children. I think that if we do that, our church has a really bright future. This is another quote from True Mother. She said, "As Jesus said of the little children, the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. A child sleeping peacefully is the epitome of peace. A child's innocent smile clearly illustrates what happiness is. A child's voice is gentle, but it opens the door to the heart. Reconciles strangers and expresses happiness and peace. It is the power of the innocent voices of children joined in song that led my husband and I to found the Little Angels of Korea, a children's folk dance and singing troupe. So this week I was asking God what I should talk about. Lately I've been having a really hard time coming up with topics for sermons. I don't know if it's because it's the summertime and a lot of people aren't here, or it's because I'm working 6 days a week renovating a house and it's hard to switch modes sometimes, like renovating, cutting wood, and plastering and crawling around in attics, and then giving a sermon don't feel too connected sometimes. But yeah, I got this inspiration to talk about this message, and I've been questioning why. Like, why am I talking about this? Sometimes I feel like if I get an inspiration, maybe it's somebody needs to hear it. But then I realized, actually this morning, that maybe I need to hear this message. Maybe I need to hear this message because, like I said earlier, it may not matter so much what you're doing, the actual work. Whether you're in school, or you're doing sports, or you're a musician, or an artist, or a pastor, or you work at McDonald's, I don't know, Maybe it doesn't matter so much what you're doing, but maybe it matters more the heart that you do it with. Maybe it doesn't matter so much that I'm working on the renovations right now. Maybe the message for me is that I should stop trudging my feet, or I've been dragging my feet a lot lately over there. I'm like, oh gosh, now I got to work on the next thing, and now I got to work on the next thing, and now I feel really tired, and I don't feel motivated, and all this stuff, right? Maybe some of you feel that way sometimes doing what you're doing. But maybe I realize maybe this is a reminder for me to remember why I'm doing what I'm doing, and to remember what heart I would like to have in doing what I do. Because I think when we all start doing something new, it's exciting, right? Because we do it for a reason, something that excites us, something that's meaningful to us, something that inspires me. But then somewhere along the way, you kind of forget, and you need to be reminded. Maybe it's the same with that. Maybe it's the same with whatever you're dealing with in your life. To reconnect with, why did I start doing this in the first place? Why is it meaningful for me? Because I think that if we were to do that, then automatically we kind of reconnect to a part of us that's a little bit childlike, a little bit excited about that thing that I started doing, but then along the way we forgot because we got caught up in all the details. And I have to remember, I'm not renovating this house to add capital value to the church portfolio. So we can say we have this amounts of assets, no, that doesn't inspire me. But to know that to remember that I'm creating a better environment for my family and for the new family that's coming here, and for Yami to be able to grow and expand because they're such a wonderful group of people. If I reconnect to those things and the excitement that comes from those things, then I'm like, oh yeah, life is work, right? Everything you want to do in life is going to require some sacrifice. It's going to require some investment. It's going to require probably some dry period where it's like you can't be inspired all the time. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't work like that. But to be reminded about and not lose sight of what inspired me in the first place. Why am I on this path? Why am I here? Why do I do what I do? Why did I get excited about it in the first place? That's really important. And I think that I think about this Matthew, this quote, this verse a lot, and I don't think I've quite figured it out. I think it's very deep what Jesus was saying then. But I think I'm starting to figure out little by little, a little bit more, why Jesus was saying, you have to have the heart of a child to be in the kingdom of heaven. I'm starting to figure it out a little bit more. So, I hope that is some meaning for you, and it's something that you may be dealing with in your life. But in general, please consider, if there's some area of your life that you feel is really weighing on you or is really heavy for you, you're just dragging your feet, go back to what was inspiring about it for you in the first place. Maybe it was just the heart to make God happy, the heart to inspire God. And it was just nothing more complicated than that. It was just as simple as that. It's all you really cared about at that time. That's probably where it's at. Or something else, something similar. Just to give without expectation, I don't know. So that's my message for today. Thank you for listening, and please join me in prayer. Good morning, Heavenly Parent. Thank you for this opportunity that I can share, and I hope that someone could have been touched by this message, that you could have spoken to our hearts in the ways that we needed to hear, Heavenly Parent. We know that our journeys, each and every one of us, are unique and different, and we go through challenges that others can't see. They in their whole life will never be able to relate with that challenge that maybe one person or people in this audience are dealing with in their life, Heavenly Parent. But you know, you've seen our lives, you've seen even like where we come from, our lineages and our ancestry, and the burdens and the crosses that we carry, Heavenly Parent. And we know that you are always seeking to work in the lives of people who are seeking to invite you into their lives, and even those who aren't. And we are constantly humbled by how great you are, by what you have done in our lives. And it gives us hope and encouragement that if we keep walking this path with you, that you will continue to do and work in our lives, Heavenly Parent, to a purpose and to an end that we can be a part of. Heavenly Parent, each and every one of us here is your child. And I hope that each and every one of us can also reconnect with that heart of a child that just wants to make our parent happy and just wants to see a smile on their face. And I thank you and offer this prayer in my name, Michael Adoni Hendrick, a blessed center family. Amen and adieu. Thank you.